So here's the second part for the graphing lines. Now in this case, we're actually going to write the equation for the lines shown. Okay, so last time we basically had to graph the linear functions. This time we're doing the reverse and writing the equations for the graph shown. Okay, now all these are going to be linear equations. Okay, so you should always have y equals and then whatever your linear equation is. So let's start with example 1 in this case. As you can see, this is supposed to be a nice horizontal line. Okay, it's a nice straight horizontal line. So in order to figure out what is our graph, we have to know some things. The first thing we need to know is our slope. Okay, so remember, we use m for slope. Now remember, slope is rise over run. Okay, so rise over run. Now, there are two ways to figure out your slope. One way is just to count your rise as well as your run, or you can find 2 points on your graph and figure that out. Now for this first one, I'm just going to count, okay? So first we have to think how much we rise. Well, in this case, if we look at our line, right, we don't see that our graph is, going up or going down. It's staying straight. So when we do this, we really are not rising any, okay? If we're not rising any, basically that just means we're rising 0, okay? Because we don't go up and we don't go down. Now we have to think how much we run. So let's say we go from this point here. This is what, 0, 3? And let's say we go over to our next point here. So 1, 3. Well, how much do we run over? We just go over 1. Okay, let's see how much we go over this time. So it seems like we go over another 1. So it seems like in this case that our run is going to be 1. Now to figure out our slope, you have to do 0 divided by 1. Okay, now go ahead, if you don't know what that is, automatically go ahead and put that in your calculator. Now, once you've done that, you should know that we got a slope of 0 because we're not rising anywhere. Okay, so now what we have to do is we have to find the rest of our equation. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to use what is called our point slope form. So I'm going to write that down. So we have point slope form. That means we are going to plug our slope and a point into our equation. Now what point slope looks like, if you forgot, is we have y minus y sub 1 equals our m, remember that's our slope, and then we have x minus x sub 1. Okay. Now you could also use a slope-intercept form to find your equation. I just feel that that's a little bit more work because you have to find your y-intercept first and then plug everything back into your equation. So now in this case, what we got to do is use a point from our line. Now it does not matter which point you use. You can use any point that is on this. Hopefully you heard me over that. I'm going to say that once more. So hopefully, okay, you're going to pick a point that is somewhere on this line. It does not matter. Well, I'm going to pick this point right here, the one in the blue. So if we see, we have to figure out what is our x value and what is our y value. So then we can plug it into here, okay? So our x value for this blue point, well, because we don't go neither left nor right, well, our x value is just 0. And then as for our y value, it looks like we go up 3. So that means our point here is 0, 3. So now what I'm going to do is plug these values into my point slope form, and then I'm going to get my equation. Now in this case, y just stays y. Okay, so we do y minus, and then here our y sub 1 is our value of 3. Now I'm going to label these. There you go, so you know. So y sub 1 means that's our 3 value. So we have y minus 3 equals, well, we said our slope was 0, so I'm plugging that in. There you go. And then we have x, we keep x as x, minus our x sub 1, which we found out is 0 as well. Next, what we do is we take our slope and we distribute it. Remember, that means you're multiplying to everything in the parentheses. So now we still have y minus 3 equals, now we do 0 times x. Well, that means we just get 0x, okay? So that just, you can either write 0x if you want to, or you don't have to. It just means we don't have any x values. And then 0 times the negative 0 should just be 0, okay? So we basically have 0x minus 0. Now what I'm going to do is I got to move this 3, because what we're trying to do is get y all by itself, because we need to get y equals whatever our equation is. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Now make sure you know how to combine like terms. Now this 3 does not have an x, so we're not combining it with the x at all. We're combining it with just our constant number, which is 0. So now we have y equals, okay, we said we had nothing here, so 0x plus 3, okay. Now in this case, this does not look right, because we really don't want to have a 0x. So I'm going to rewrite this. Since we don't have 0x, I'm just going to not write anything for x values. So all we're left with is our constant, which is the value of 3. So our function in this case is y equals 3. And now, if you look here, we know that if we look at this entire horizontal line, our y value for every single x value is just 3. So if you know that for a horizontal line, okay, for any horizontal line, our graph will always be in this form. It will always be for y equals whatever our y value is. And that's basically what we got. We got y equals 3. And that is our answer right there. Okay. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Because as we look at example 2, this is not just a straight or a horizontal or vertical line. This actually looks like it's increasing, okay? So we're basically going to do the exact same thing as we did last time. Now, this time to find slope, you could just count basically your rise and your run, which I'm okay with that. But I'm going to show you the other way of figuring out your slope using the formula, because you probably guys have forgotten how to use that formula. So I'm going to show you that. So I'm going to pick 2 points that are on this line to figure out my slope. Okay. Now, to figure out slope, we have m, and we know it's going to be rise over run. Now, if it's going to be rise over run, our formula in this case is going to be as so. I'm going to pull this down so you guys can see the formula. So we have y sub 2 minus y sub 1 all over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So in this case, we subtract our y values and divide by the difference of our x values, okay? So here, we're going to plug in values for y sub 2 and y sub 1, as well as x sub 2 and x sub 1. Now let me list or write out what my 2 points are. So my first one, if I look, is negative 2, 0, okay? And then my other point is this. Let's see. So we have negative 1, up 1, 2, 3. So negative 1, 3. Okay. So first, in order to find our slope, we have to subtract our y values. Now, it does not matter which one you make your second y value, which one you make your first one, okay? Let's just say we make 0 our first y value, so that's going to be y sub 1, and then 3 is going to be our y sub 2. So here I do 3 minus 0. Now, when you subtract the x, now this becomes very important. Because our 3 was our y sub 1, our y sub 2, we have to make negative 1 our x sub 2 as well. So your x and y values have to be corresponding. So now it does matter your order. So now we have to take negative 1 minus, now we do negative 2, so that's going to be our x sub 1. And we do minus a negative 2. Now in this case, as you can see, we have 2 negatives. Remember, 2 negatives make a positive, so we make this plus, and then we have a positive 2. So now writing this, we have equals 3, because we did 3 minus 0 to give us 3. Then we have now negative 1 plus 2. Now what we have to do is we have to simplify. So we have the 3 up in the numerator, and now we do negative 2 plus 2 to give us 1. And then we know 3 divided by 1 gives us 3. So our slope in this case is 3. So now what we're going to do is use our point slope form. So y minus y sub 1 equals our slope times x minus x sub 1 to figure out the equation of our line. Now, in this case, we're going to plug in a y value in for y sub 1 and an x value for x sub 1. It does not matter what point you use as long as it's on your line. Now, I'm just going to use one of the points that we already had. So I'm going to use the points negative 2, 0. Okay, because I always think if you have a 0, it's a lot easier to find your equation. So I leave y as y minus, so now I do my y sub 1, so it's a y value. In this case, I'm going to use 0. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is equals my slope. We said slope was 3. We have x minus our x sub 1. So I'm using negative 2. So we have negative minus, there you go. So minus a negative 2. So now we have to simplify. So here I do y minus 0 equals, so here make sure with that 3 you distribute it to everything inside our parentheses. Now in order to do that, right, remember 2 negatives make a positive, so this becomes a plus and our 2 becomes a positive. So we do 3 times x to give us 3x. Then we do 3 times, now what is a positive 2? That gives us a plus 6. Okay. Now make sure you get 0 or y all by itself. So in order to do this, we add 0 to both sides. Now zeros are constant, so over here you have to add 0 to your constant as well, which in this case is 6. So now we have y equals 3x plus 6. And so this would be the equation of our line. So in this case, 6 is our y-intercept and 3 is our slope. Now make sure if you have any questions on how to get these lines, make sure you email me or ask before or after school. Okay? Okay, so now moving on, I would like you guys to try these next two. So you are writing the equation of each of these lines. So go ahead and pause the video so you can try both of these on your own. So hopefully you pause the video so that you try these on your own. If you have some difficulties, I'm here to explain it. So with number 1, here you have your equation. Now, remember, you can pick any 2 points on your line. So if you pick 2 other points, that is okay. Just make sure your slope is correct and at the end that your equation is correct. Okay? So the points I picked was -5, 1 and -2, 3. So these are the 2 points I picked. And I figured out what slope was using the formula. Now, you can have figured out slope by counting. That would be okay as well. Now, we usually just use the formula just in case if it's difficult to figure out the slope. So I used the formula and I got 2/3 as my slope. Now we have to plug that into our function. Now, if you notice here, we do cross the y-intercept. Usually you can just plug that into your slope-intercept form and get your graph. But sometimes we don't cross at a perfect place right here, right? We don't cross at a whole number. So because of that, that's why we are using point slope form. So we can find our equation when it's hard to figure out our y-intercept. So what I did was I used the points of -5, 1 to plug into my point slope form. So my m was 2/3, and then I plugged in 1, which was my basically y value, and -5, which was my x value. So here you can see that I did the math, so if you need to pause the video to kind of look at my math, go ahead and do so. And at the end, you can see that my answer for my equation is y equals 2/3 x plus 13/3. Okay, so for the next one, I did the exact same thing. I picked 2 points that are on the graph. Remember, you don't have to pick the same 2. And then I figured out my slope by using the formula, okay? Now if you count it, that should be okay as well. Now the points I used was -1, 6 and 1, 5 to figure out my slope, which I got as 1/2. Now if you need to pause the video to see like what math I did, make sure you do that. Okay, now moving on, I'm going to take my m value and one of my points and plug into point slope form. -1/2 is my slope, and the point I used was -1, 6. So that's what I'm going to plug in. So I'm going to pause it here so you guys can see the math, okay? So now as you can see, as I plugged it in, kind of going further down, continuing on with my math, I try to get y all by itself. And as my answer, I got -1/2 x plus 11/2. Now, for this one, it's okay if you would like to use decimals, but I would recommend using fractions because it tells a lot more about what your line is going to look like and where you cross the y-intercept. Okay? So, make sure for any of this that you pause the video to kind of look at my math. If you have extra questions or need additional help, please come in before or after school, or you can always email me as well. Okay, I'm going to go back up so you guys can kind of see maybe my notes up here. So go ahead and pause if you need to see what I wrote here. And then here were the two examples that you had to try.